What I'm looking at is the pretty pictures. We have pretty pictures. And as you know, you can't build something without pretty pictures.
Now, how big is this arena again?
They say 18,000 seats, which is pretty much what you need to have if you're going to have a professional sports team.
Can I ask a question?
By the way, courtesy of Grow Omaha, they got a conceptual drawing of this NHL/USA volleyball facility / arena. It wouldn't be the whole facility, but it's the arena.
I like how they have the NHL logo on it. That's very nice. That's
I didn't realize that this was an all-encompassing arena.
What do you mean?
For both. I thought it was just for the hockey.
Well, I mean, no. The hockey.
It's just
would
like
use
how
most of
CHI can do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they would build other training facilities and the like for USA volleyball.
They would do Monday Night Raw from this too.
So let me ask a question.
Well, they could.
I feel like this is the question that most people will ask about this stuff, but we have not gotten into yet.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need this? Do we need this?
Do we need
another 18,000 seat stadium? And I know this is essentially the question that was asked about the soccer stadium a few weeks ago when we talked about that. And so I'm not asking this trying to imply that we do not need it. I'm just wondering, do we need this?
Need? No.
Obviously want. Do we want this?
Some want, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, it is a very good question to ask because right now you have two major arenas within 50 miles of each other that already compete against each other for events like Nick was saying, Monday Night Raw, anytime the WWE comes in, or concerts or rodeos, monster jams, anything that you put in arenas. And if you were to add another one into the mix, now granted, this one, if it were built, would have a full-time tenant that would play 40 games plus a year in an NHL hockey team.
Well, but would it?
What?
Can this be built without an NHL team?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
You're not building. If anyone's building an 18,000 seat arena and you don't have a tenant assigned to it, then that is a gigantic waste of money. So, from what I understand is the original idea was they were going to build some kind of an arena adjacent with the arrival of USA Volleyball. And then the developer thought, well, wait a minute, why don't we think even bigger? Yates
must dream a little bigger, darling.
Hockey
saying that, well, wait, why don't we think bigger, like bring in an NHL team?
So
that's why this arena part exists.
So if the NHL isn't coming, then this is a non-starter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then we're not getting this, right? Because the NHL is not coming to Omaha.
No, likely it's not.
Okay.
Absolutely.
See, I guess maybe there was
the arena's not going to get built first, and then you hope for a team to show up.
Because I thought this was
they're not going to build this thing
just for the volleyball.
Yeah. But if you build it, they will come.
That's what they did say that in that movie. Okay, because that's what I was wondering about, John. Was could you build this if it was just the volleyball? And that's why I asked the question. So I apologize as we pull back. I was not trying to ask this. Do we need this? Assuming we're also getting an NHL team. Because if the answer is, if you build this, Omaha gets an NHL team, I say, sign me the hell up. Let's do it. But if the answer is no, then I would again ask that question. Do we actually need this?
Well, I wanted to dive into some numbers because the folks, obviously there's a lot of, there are some diehard hockey fans who just think this is the greatest idea ever. And I understand it. I mean, if my favorite sport were coming closer to me, I would be gung-ho for it, and I wouldn't care about the numbers.
And I would say this, too. As someone who is not a diehard hockey fan, though my Wings are up 3-2 right now on the Kraken with a minute left in the second period, I would like this because I think, first of all, it's a major four sport, and I know that hockey is nowhere near really the big three, but it's a big four sport. It's professionalized sports, at the highest level of this sport in America. And I think that would be incredible to have. Incredible to have.
Got some figures from the folks over at Sportico.
Okay.
This is the revenue breakdown of the big four sports. In other words, where does the money come from in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL? And
so there are five
there
parts
are basically five revenue streams. There's the national revenue, which is generally the TV money.
So, for example, like the NFL, that is where 66% of their revenue comes from. It comes from television revenue.
Correct.
Which makes sense, obviously.
Yeah, national revenue is generally television revenue.
Okay.
Then your ticket sales and your suite sales, your sponsorships, your local media, meaning your local television or your local radio, and concessions, parking, and other.
Man,
And of the big four sports, no sport relies more on what I would classify as local revenue than the NHL.
And what would you classify as local revenue?
Everything but the major TV contract. Because think about it. Your seats and your suites are all bought by people that live in your community.
Yeah.
Your team sponsorships, you're selling sponsorships to corporate interests in your community.
Yeah, and obviously there's going to be some national stuff, but a lot of it would be some local stuff.
Your local media,
literally,
pretty self-evident. And then concessions and parking, again, pretty self-evident. So just using a rough sketch, 81% of an average NHL team's revenues come from local money versus just 33% in the NFL, or 59% in the NBA, or 74% in Major League Baseball. And the point is this. So if you're going to bring a franchise, an NHL franchise to Omaha, 81% of the money you generate is going to have to come from Omaha.
Yeah.
And that's a heavy burden.
Yeah, because it's not just like concessions, parking, essentially talking about the average fan, the average sports fan. I think that money, you're certainly going to be able to get whatever you need to, right? Because I think that there'd be such a curiosity about an NHL team that I wouldn't worry at all about, again, average fan that wants to go watch the team. It's the sponsorships and it's the suites, it's the high-end dollars. Would Omaha be able to get that type of money again 41 times?
Is there enough of that money that exists in the community?
Is there enough big money to make this worth the while?
And if you notice, if you look at the pie chart, the seating in the suites is 44% of the NHL's intake, which is far greater than any other sport. The NFL only relies 17% on tickets.
That's incredible.
But the NHL relies 44%. Almost half of their revenues come from tickets.
Real quick, that shows why Thursday Night Football and flex scheduling does not bother them, because so little of their revenue comes from the fans themselves, whereas you can't do that with hockey, you can't do that with basketball, you can't do that with baseball. You have to lock that stuff in because how reliant you are of that revenue.
So roughly half of your money has to come from the people buying season tickets, the folks buying the premium seats, the folks buying the suites.
Yeah.
And again, that's a heavy lifting burden. So you might be wondering, all right, well, what does it cost to be a season ticket holder?
What's it cost to be a season ticket holder, John?
Well, I looked at the closest possible example to an Omaha franchise would be Buffalo, because Buffalo is the smallest market that has an NHL franchise in the United States. There are smaller markets in Canada, but you have to throw Canada to the side because
it's their
Canadian
sport.
NHL teams get a far greater percentage of their money from television than American franchises do, because in Canada, their TV deal is much more lucrative than the TV deal that they get in the United States.
It's a big sport up there, Nick.
And you're talking, this is their sport.
Yeah.
This is their NFL.
Yeah.
This is not our NFL, and it's not even our college football.
Even though their NFL is called the CFL.
So I looked at the Buffalo Sabres, and basically you're looking at season ticket packages that range anywhere from $1,500 a season to $6,000 a season, depending on obviously where you want to sit.
Mm-hmm.
Most of you who buy season tickets for Husker football are paying prices that are approaching some of those numbers. Those of you who have season tickets and premium seating for Husker basketball or Creighton basketball, I'm not sure exactly what it is you're paying, but the question would be this: are there enough people in this market that would be able to pony up this kind of money on a regular basis? Because again, nearly half the revenues, nearly half of an average NHL team's revenues come from these season ticket holders, the people who buy the tickets to the game. Don't look at StubHub. Don't look at resale price. These are season ticket holders, because that's the money that's going directly to the team. That's a pretty hefty price to pay.
Yeah.
For all of them.
And it's funny because Ultimately, John, the reason that I don't think it will come to Omaha is not because we couldn't support it, because I really do think that we could support it and we would do so very, very well. It's because our market is too small and it would just be an odd decision. In a league full of odd decisions, Gary Bettman has done a lot of weird crap in his time. Choosing Omaha over some of the other markets would just be baffling to me and to a lot of others.
Some more graphics from Sportico. If you notice the seating and the suites, the Major League Baseball gets about $3.3 billion of its average revenue from tickets. Then the NFL at 3.1, then the NHL at $3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're getting that money from. And then, the other sundry stuff. But
local media would be interesting because I hadn't thought about who would broadcast the games.
And that's the other thing.
Like we don't have, Fox Sports is essentially non-existent now, but we don't have, who would it be in local over the air? Would it be a KTV, a KM, who would do the games? Would we have to create in a way a brand new network?
Well, I can only speak exactly to the radio rights, but the only contract that would approach an NHL radio contract, I would assume, would be the Husker contract.
Yeah.
And I know that there are stations who don't necessarily make money on that because it's that expensive.
Correct.
Because it's that lucrative a deal. I don't know if you would have very aggressive bidding for that because, for example, I'll speak on behalf of NRG Media. We're not going to be bidding on any NHL contract if we don't think we can make money on the deal.
On top of that,
if we don't think we can make money on the deal, we will say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, and I guess if you could make money off of it, then you deal with what I'm about to say next. But just the raw tonnage of games and then the things that we already have, for example, would just make it so difficult. Where would you put it?
You would obviously make room for it and you would prioritize.
But yeah, where would it go on television? Because that would be a huge piece of this pie.
Yeah.
Given that they would broadcast upwards of 35, 36, 37 games a year. During the I was just thinking home game. You're probably looking at over 70 games that you would have to broadcast.
And this is again another long shot reason why moving to a market like Omaha makes little sense. If you go to a place like Milwaukee, you have entities already there who are broadcasting the Nets, or I'm sorry, the Bucks,
the Brewers,
and the like.
Correct.
You already have a pro market with Fortune 500 type companies that spend that kind of money.
Infrastructure.
You go to a place like Houston, which is the largest market to not have the NHL.
Yeah.
There's all of that. Plus, there's just the optics of it. The NHL, again, does not derive a lot of its revenues from its national TV contract because, it's down the list. Their national TV revenue is basically $1.3 billion a year.
Yeah.
Which is far below baseball, basketball, and the NFL.
Tim,
but you if you want to make that contract more lucrative, you got a better chance if you include markets like Houston or Kansas City or Milwaukee than you do if you add markets like Omaha.
Yeah,
which are way down the list.
Correct. Because in a way, you would need it to be such a big hit here to make up for maybe some lack of interest elsewhere.
But remember, the other owners, right? They want to make money off of you too.
Yeah.
They want whoever their new partner is, because that's what they're doing when they're adding expansion franchises is they're adding new partners. They want those partners to bring with them equity to make their product more valuable. Well, is an ownership group in a place like Houston, Texas going to be more valuable to that bottom line, or Omaha, Nebraska to that bottom line? The answer, I think you already know.
Yeah, Tim and Dallas text into 402-951-1620. Given the number of games, relatively smaller market/population, overall cost of attendance, is this really feasible in the Omaha-Lincoln market? It may cut into availability of money and compete directly with NU Athletics, which dominates the extra cash flow from Nebraskans. See, that's an interesting point. We haven't really hit on it, but I always think back to the Thunder. When they came into existence, some of the folks down there, Barry Trammell, for example, have talked about what was the down effect of that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was that people lost interest in Oklahoma and Oklahoma State basketball, actually, because, they had the best version of it. Not to mention, when they got that team, it was the beginning of this incredible run for over a half decade with some of the best young stars in the NBA. And so it took away from that. Football, college football, the interest level in the Sooners and the Cowboys still what it always has been.
Sure.
But it affected the other sports. And like, I think that this would certainly have a large effect on the Mavs. I think it would have a large effect on the Lancers. But I think there's an interesting question to wonder about, where would some of the money go, and would it go into the NHL versus, being taken away actually from basketball and not even so much some of those other hockey sports.
Certainly.
Or hockey teams, rather.
Certainly. Yeah.